another program of a better world. Today we are very fortunate to have with us Moses Mann. Moses is a colleague and old friend of mine who's been involved in the world of bodywork and psychic channeling for the past 7 or so years. He's done extraordinary work with people, has helped to bring them up into states of ecstasy and revelation time and time again. It's quite amazing. I've had the chance to be worked on by him, and because of that I wanted to bring him forth to all of you so you can have a chance to glimpse this world that you may know of or you may not. And I tell you, it is really a world to enter. So on that note, I'd like to bring Moses forth and let you know that this will be the first of several shows that will include Moses. We can't possibly get all of Moses in on one show. So we'll be probably doing an infinite number of them with Moses. So Moses, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, indeed. So have you ever been on A Better World before?
I have dreamt about it. It's true.
Good, good. So you have a real relationship to it.
It's true. This is the first, using my own sense of humor, this is the first pun of the reality of a real world, and I'm partaking in it. It's usually a dream state for me. So thank you for having me, Mitchell.
Absolutely. It's really a pleasure to have you on. Absolutely. So to start with, if you would, give us some idea of what your background is and what got you involved in this kind of work in the first place.
Well, first of all, I'm now really at a point where I can be honest and state the what you would call psychic or extrasensory perceptive abilities I've always had since a child. I have had no real teachers for, in the youth and adolescence. You usually are just playing with your imagination and curiosity, and are somewhat fearful that others will think you're other than sane if you display that.
What gave you the idea that you were perhaps more sensitive or extra sensitive from other children?
With my vision, I could see and comprehend that I was seeing what was in vision and what was pre-imposed on top of it. I also had what I now began to realize, many out-of-body experiences, and this was around the age of like 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a fascinating journey to understand now what I always did as a child, but for the sake of conformity and to be a part of everyone else.
Yes.
Keeping that in a very reclusive state. And 7 years ago, I began to do body work. I had been worked on by a number of practitioners, Rolfers, masseurs, a number of people. Mm-hmm. And I started working with a couple of people just doing touch. It wasn't really anything formalized or anything like Swedish or shiatsu. And to my surprise, a couple of the people came back and said, I don't know what you did to me, but something shifted and changed. The more I did, the more I seemed to know what to do, the more response I got from clients, the more I was encouraged. Mm-hmm. And with all of that trust and a lot of the fear that came with it, I began to continue to do more of the work, which brought up other talents, clairvoyance, which brought up other things like the actual channeling process, working with auras, chakras, things of that sort.
So that came out of what you were doing in the body work.
Right. The body work became the premise for a lot of other talents and abilities to be given, I would say, credence or a little bit of space in my consciousness to come forward. I now understand, as with all of us, these abilities remain dormant until they are given the space in consciousness to come forward. And usually it's in a non-threatening or non-expected state. I was working on Prince just for the sake of it, so there was no real pressure to be anything other than play.
Mm-hmm. So you were having fun.
Exactly.
And out of that, you began to discover these parts of yourself.
The fun and the enjoyment became the essential gestalt for all of them to come into an actual manifestation for me to work with and be a little more practical with, and kind of structure it into a technique and into a therapy, a therapy for the electromagnetic energy fields.
Now, did you forget what happened to you in childhood and remember it when you began doing the body work? Or had you always remained in touch with the extra sensitive aspects of yourself and they just began to come forth?
I'll tell you something
When you
interesting
began
about
doing
that.
work.
I never forgot, to be quite honest with you, Mitchell, and all of you. I began to hurt myself to numb the abilities. Those of you out there probably can't see I've got on my third eye. I never lost sight of any of this stuff, but I thought if I did things to the physical body, if I thought that I could, sort of wear sunglasses or do certain things to sort of numb these, because
You wouldn't see through
I wouldn't
people.
see through people,
Things
or I
like
wouldn't
that.
be able to sense what was happening.
Mhm.
So I always had the abilities. They did not go dormant. I just never allowed myself to use them, ever. Very, very rarely. And if I did, it was usually a situation where I was just not understood. So of course, that sense of lack of acceptance as I was growing up was something that no one wants to thrive on, so it just didn't become a part of me until recently.
So you, like so many other people that I've heard about, sought to blunt or dull their intelligence.
Right.
If I may put it in that
Perfect
way.
word.
It's a level of perception that many people are born with. In fact, one story has it that we are all in fact born with great gifts of seeing, of feeling, and relating to each other. And we slowly and surely lose it. And we lose it to convention. We lose it to conforming perceptions that are governing society. And as a result, we in a sense become dumb. And there are some people who are fortunate enough to reconnect to these abilities and to these perceptions and wake them up again and help to wake them up in other people. And that's really very much been your role.
It's true. I also think that everyone, even in our multitudes, has, well, as they say, you're a star for 15 minutes, for some it's 7 years. In other words, everyone makes a contribution within time.
Mm-hmm.
And for myself and others, it's timing in terms of when these things can be facilitate large groups. Right now, I don't know if what I'm doing now would have been of benefit to as many people as it is now. Consciousness for all of us seems to be much more reticent to accept these things. So of course, people like myself, it would be a time that we would wake up because we would be utilized. We would be utilizing ourselves in an acceptance of that creativity and benefiting this in terms of offering something that quite simply deals with an evolutionary aspect of what everyone has. So some of us, I think, the alarm clock goes up and says, it's your time, you can offer this now. And for a lot of us, I think that is really the other education, is knowing that these extrasensory or these talents, whether they are psychic, metaphysical, artistic, will have their time. And they will be appreciated in a time where they can really be utilized and be a creative tool for us.
So how do you feel, Moses, that these talents of yours are now being used in the world?
Well, first of all, I call myself, and I say that loosely, a facilitator, because my talents are to facilitate the conscious expansion of the individual. Now, there are many ways to get through that. You can get through it as we're doing through talking and just having a kind of wonderful, intimate rapport. You can get through it through touch. The physical body is designed to allow you to do that. You can get through it through tone, music, or tonal vibration. And you can also get through it through something called channeling, which is literally myself being a vehicle to open up to other disembodied or spirit entities to coming forth and communing. Simply for the aspect of experience, simply for the aspect of feelings and sensations. Now, this amplification just allows a person to be much more comfortable with an expanded sense of themselves, which they've got all the time. So I'm kind of a person that allows them to acclimate to their own abilities and kind of triggers them to a certain extent and provides a very safe environment for them to appreciate it rather than figure it out, judge it, condemn it, and pigeonhole it once again.
So for you to access these entities, these spirits, is it by their request or is it by yours?
It is mutual agreement, as all relationships are, even though they are not of a third dimensional density. It is an agreement that I've made, and it is an agreement that they've made. And in so being, the learning is from both aspects. Because I often think that they have more
From
to
both
offer than-
sides.
yes. But they, well, one in particular uses the analogy, it's like parents and children. You know, parents
Very
always
true.
learn from the children. And the children, parents learn as much from the children as the children learn from the parents. And the more creative the children get, the more the parents have to continue to be creative in their teaching.
Sure. It looks like another analogy for that kind of thing has to do with therapists and clients, a psychotherapist.
Right.
It looks like the therapist, and it's set up for the therapist to be teaching, educating the client. And any real therapist will say, any honest therapist will say that they are learning as much from the therapy as the client. This is just the way it is. The way a Jungian analyst once put it, when I was working with him, he said to me, there are always two people in analysis.
It's wonderful.
That's the way it is.
Well, I think it enhances the experience so that there isn't, let's just say, a circuit off. You've got two live wires, and when you've got that, you're always going to have a lot of electricity.
So let me ask you a simple question, and maybe even silly. What if you're brushing your teeth, and someone wants to come and knock on your door and have a chat from the spirit world? What happens?
Well, first of all,
Or do they wait for other moments, like when you're showering?
That's
Something.
one of the moments where they seem to be most of the time.
The water appeals to them.
The water appeals to them. Also doing simple innocuous things like dishes or having to clean something, or if I'm out in the country, you know, washing the car.
So it might be when the mind is quieter.
When it's quieter
less
and I'm not
engaged.
as concerned to figure it out or to really focus on it with an intent of I've got to do something with it. So it really becomes, as I begin to understand them, they're looking to enhance experience, not to get it right or wrong, but just giving
To enhance your experience?
experience, period. Whether it's experience of walking to the front door. I mean, life is experience in every moment. They are looking to allow us to appreciate and enhance experience, period.
So their interest in interacting with us and you is to, in a sense, teach us how to be more alive,
Exactly.
more connected, more conscious.
The
more
earth
deliberate.
is how to appreciate the miracle of what this reality really is. Because we do take advantage of it.
And take it for granted.
Exactly, and there are aspects of it that are still remaining dormant that would be to our benefit to be aware of.
Such as what?
Well, how to really work with the sense of truly enjoying this reality rather than working at it.
What a relief to hear that. Is everyone else relieved?
Because
I
we are, the convention has you work
Too much
at
work
living
at, right.
rather than enjoying living. And with the enjoyment, you start bringing in gestalts of emotion, gestalts of imagery that would literally create what we call genius. Because genius does not know limitation. And that's what they're trying to really allow us to see is how creative we are within the context of such a creative realm, which we, and I don't mean to speak for all of you out there, take for granted as just being another person, another day, but each one is a genius in its own individual insight. That is really their work in facilitation. Which I
So
believe-
lifting off the limits, removing the limits, and allowing people to enter a sense of consciousness that is without the boundaries that we place upon them. The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley is all about this subject. And there's a lot of work in perception psychology concerning how we close down what there is to see, what there is to feel, what there is to experience. So it sounds like is somehow these other dimensional beings relate to you and have a way of opening up your perception, and you can then pass that on vibrationally or otherwise, verbally, to others when they work with you.
It becomes
Would
a
you say
shared,
that?
yes.
Is that a way of putting it?
Yes, I would say that. It becomes a shared experience for myself, with them intimately, and to everyone else as a result of those who come to either a private session or to the groups. A wonderful analogy that Mary, one of the guides, has with me, it's like you can't really build a building if the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh floors is not solid. All the other floors will not have their sense of foundation. And the universe is like the World Trade Center. There are those who are on the 120th floor who just have a more encompassing view. It does not make them better. It just makes their view a lot more encompassing.
Sure.
But those on the 15th floor are still connected as part of that whole aspect.
They're closer to the ground.
Exactly. And they also are a bit more foundational in their sense of understanding. A lot of what these guides speak about is really allowing us also to embrace more what is called our abstract mind. Because when you're on the third floor, you can probably see the front of the building and maybe the back lot. When you're on the 120th floor, you've got a full view, which means all kinds of perspectives can be taken in, up, down, from 2 miles away, 20 miles. So you've got a grander sense of perspective.
It's more of the view of the eagle, really.
Right, exactly.
As opposed to the mouse.
Right, exactly. Well, I've had a wonderful experience realizing myself and also being realized in doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
It's been dual. As I embrace more of it, it seems to be given through enjoyment a new energy that allows it to transform. So everyone I work with is a new opportunity for transformation of me, of new things, of new ways of operating, new ideas and situations, which is again why I call it facilitating. So there isn't a hierarchy of me being the practitioner and there being a client. Then there's another sense of separation and a bit of judgment. Facilitator means that everything is equal and we're just putting one channel with another channel with another channel with another channel. And then you've got cable.
That's right. And on that note, I think we're very close to needing a station break. So please stay tuned. Have you seen large, amazing, miraculous crystals lately? Well, here we are in Moses' space, and he's going to take us for a little tour of some of his amazing natural crystals. Moses, please.
Oh, my pleasure for the crystal menagerie. First off, this is called selenite. It is in a crystal family. What I use for all of these, or what they metaphorically represent, are certain elements. Selenite represents flow, and with the Gestalts I'm working with, there's large flows of consciousness, large flows of expansiveness, and this just placed in the electromagnetic energy of the body metaphorically allows that concept to be deduced in whatever form that the body finds most appropriate. These two larger stones here, one is chrysocolla, it represents memory. Chrysocolla, this one right here. The other one over here is called beryl. It's in the aquamarine family, and metaphorically it represents truth. So you have the past of memory and the present and future that always relays on truth. And I work with a number of very wonderful, interesting artisans who have made different talismans for me that have just represented the aspect of what I do with work or their concept of me in terms of a metaphysical sense. And this is what is called a talking stick. And certain shamans use this because it created sound, or use their own talking sticks, to create sound. With sound is vibration. With vibration there is movement. And I place
talking sticks are part of many Native people's ritual.
It is true.
In terms of bringing forth truth, bringing forth honesty,
movement,
relating to earth,
communication.
Very true.
What you see of the two darker spheres is obsidian, which is one of my favorites. They were often called the wizard stones, only because they metaphorically represent the void, the vastness of existence. Looking in them, you see no form, which means you're dealing with all of Source. They're quite powerful. On them, you see a cube, which interestingly enough, with a lot of these crystals, I would see them in a store and I'd come home and in my dreams, they would it's like cats or dogs who'd follow you home if they ever saw you on the street. And I would then know that I need to purchase them, or quite simply, they would give you a sense, a feeling that, you know, when you touch some of them, you just couldn't put them down back on the shelf. They kind of held in your hand like, okay, take me, we belong together.
Mm-hmm.
The small pots in the ground, I do and have done a lot of traveling, especially in the Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
And next to them are the kachinas.
Sure.
The kachinas, interestingly enough, I got those on the Hopi Indian reservation. I saw them being made. I walked into one of the small homes there, and the gentleman was in process of making them. This is the deer. The deer represents a person or individual who likes to be challenged. It's why oftentimes in the Native American cultures, the strongest in the tribes were the bucks.
Mm-hmm.
They would often challenge themselves. It also represents in the challenge the heart of the matter, the heart of the man.
Mm-hmm.
The other one over there is the holy man, which I thought was appropriately, being a facilitator practitioner, that would be the other one that would be made.
Sure.
And in some of these crystals, some of them broke off, so I took little aspects of them and placed them very strategically on parts of the kachina.
Mm-hmm.
And with this one here, it just so happens that I was doing a lot of wonderful shopping and got him a wonderful little bow and arrow that complemented the aspect.
Truly.
Which means that in any kind of healing, you're being very direct, very clear, very true to the loving source. And all the other rest, of the crystals are
These are geodes, is that so? Or
no,
part of?
yes, they are. You know how they come out, as you can see on the back. Many of these are done in geodes, huge geodes. I mean, some of them would be as large as let's say like 5 or 6 feet around. And what they would do in Brazil with amethyst is sometimes put a little explosive cap in there and break them up. And
Just
breaking
looks
them
like
up,
a sliver
right,
of one.
you would get pieces of them. Now, for those of you who are interested, the darker the color, the older the amethyst.
Mm-hmm.
The lighter the color, the younger geologically the amethyst is. And these two I call the sisters because they seem to be a matched pair.
Now, what do you use this for?
When you work, the color also has a lot to do with it. You know, black deals with infinite expansiveness.
Mm-hmm.
The white light deals with clarity of direction. Purple, in particular, or violet as it's known, color of your uppermost physical chakra on the body. So what you're dealing with then is what comes in clarity, and also what you're giving back to universal source in clarity. So amethysts usually work, or I usually work with them. I mean, they're tools, which means they do have basic concepts, but it's all relative to your own sense of imagination. I use it for clarity of the mind. I also use it for clarity also of the base chakra, the emotional center, because the clearer you are with these 2 points on your physical body, the more creative you'll be with your experience.
The bottom chakra and the top chakra.
Yeah, the root chakra. But in particular, I use the amethyst to allow for a vibration of clarity of mind and thinking. And violet is the color of that 7th chakra. And you can match the stones accordingly in that aspect. Citrine and other ones really deal with the emotional nature. It really looks brown, but its aspects is gold, and gold would be the 3rd chakra right above the spleen. Excuse me, it is the spleen. And they're all metaphoric of colors that work with chakras. Chakras are the energy vortexes and portals of the physical body that, first of all, have a non-physical inference that eventually becomes physical. You might say those are your energy zones. Mm-hmm. And all crystals do is amplify the energy zones. So if there's any blockage, the blockage moves out, or they allow the energy zones to take on a new creative sense so that other talents and abilities can then be used by you as a personality.
Sure.
So they do a lot. I call them also flowers because crystals in many cases don't have judgment. You can give them to anyone or whatever, and all they'll do is amplify what it is. As a flower, all it does is going to make whatever it's in look beautiful.
Sure.
So,
well, thank you very much for this explanation and this little tour of your crystal garden. So I think we're out of time for today, so I want to thank Moses again for being our guest.
welcome.
And we are going to have Moses on again very soon, even as soon as next week. So please, everyone, come back and join us, and we will continue with Moses Mann. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask Moses, you can reach him at area code 212-245-191. I'll repeat that for all of you who are listening very closely. 212-245-1691. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Mitchell Rabin from A Better World. See you next week.
Cucaracha, cucaracha. That's enough.
Hello, welcome back to A Better World. We're glad to have you with us again, and we're also glad to have Moses Mann with us again. He was our guest last week, and he's our guest again this week. So thanks for coming and joining us, and I hope you enjoyed what you saw last time, and we're going to go into further depth this time with Moses about the work he does and what he's doing in his way to create a better world. So Moses, hello.
Hello,
Again.
Mitchell. Once again.
Hello.
Well, I'm having a great time.
Are you? I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. It's been wonderful being in your space here and looking at all the different objects that you have here and the different feelings that you have created in this space that you share with people. I'd like to hear today, if you would just tell us about some of the kinds of people that you work with and some of the results that you have gotten in working with them through the facilitation process?
Okay. Most that have come, usually it's been by word of mouth, are those that are really seeking to expand upon their own spiritual or metaphysical insights. Now that's pretty broad in terms of what I'm saying. I'll be specific. I often don't choose to know exactly what's going to take place, which then leaves a lot to creativity and a lot to the sense of imagination as to what can be done in the moment with people. And working with that sense, I get more, they get more than they ever anticipate. With the body work, what usually happens is you go into a state, what seems to be a sleep-like state. All that does is just move your mind out of its logical thinking mode and allows other aspects of your mental perception to kick in. In other words, space is created. And in that space, I facilitate them with working with abstract concepts, dream scenarios that they're curious about,
As in interpreting
their own dreams, or getting a clear sense of what the metaphor is, contacting their own spirit guides, or dearly departed relatives, or symbolism that's appropriate. I just provide the environment or an arena in which a lot of things can come to a clear sense of understanding.
Through them in their own
In that sense, I'm not doing anything to them, I'm creating the space for them.
Indeed.
And that is what I call
environment for their own being and their own intelligence to manifest. When you said abstract concepts, what abstract concepts?
Well, the sense that one can go into, let's say, a future sense of themselves, or literally go back in time, or see themselves in a situation that at the moment seems totally impossible from where they're at. That would be deemed abstract by the mind, by the conventions we are often taught. This is what's real.
Okay, so another way of putting this is imaginative time play.
Right. Imaginative time play. Also, imaginative results that, again, just do not seem logical by how most people would perceive process. And in that moment, you are your own director, you are your own cameraman, you're your own leading lady and leading man. You play all of the parts, so what you come up with is a part of your own honoring of individuation, period.
Very nice. As a psychotherapist, I translate what you're saying into my own idiom. And what this sounds like is a self-psychodrama.
Right.
And we get to be the protagonist, the antagonist, the cameraman, the director, and the producer all at once.
In that sense, it, as you know, within your own sense of facilitation, you're the creator, and then all responsibility is then acknowledged. And with that acknowledgement, there is nothing other than you. And in that sense, you then have a sense of appreciation, a sense of honoring that gestalt. If there is no other, then you're it. And if most were to think that way, then this whole planetary sense of understanding would shift dramatically.
That's interesting. There are two, it's almost funny because it's like there are two opposite ways of viewing the same phenomenon. One is that we are ourselves the center of the universe.
Right.
And there is another systemic way of looking, which indicates and suggests that we are all part of an interdependent system.
Right.
And are, in a sense, cogs in a wheel, parts of the whole. And yet, if from whichever vantage point we come, it will have a similar kind of result.
And as a wonderful analogy of a guy that I work with, Mary says, it becomes a rich dessert with many spices. And the wonderful thing about cooking is that many different kinds of spices create something that enhances all senses. You know, you've got the smell, you've got the taste, you didn't have the texture. You know, these are all the things that sort of excite, again, experience.
Sure.
And essentially that is what my sense of facilitation does, is allows the person the most heightened sense of experience. And with that, it's translated any way that their consciousness is, or if there's any blocks or perception limitations, those come right up to the surface without having to dig to find them. They're sifted out in the expansiveness that's created. It's like oil that floats to the top of water.
Indeed. It's like if you create an environment for people's real selves to come to the fore, it comes up. It really comes up. It's that in life we have so few places where we can be, just be, and allow ourselves to manifest quite simply, quite openly, and honestly. We come to people such as Moses to have that sense where in his quietude, in his space, we can simply come and allow our problems, ourselves, our wishes, our dreams, our hopes, our fantasies to come to the surface and be dealt with in a very calm and loving space. That's what I've experienced working with you, for sure.
It's what I've also experienced by being the facilitator for mine, a calm and a comfort and a sense of growth and everything else involved in in the process as well. So it is really, again, a mutual sense of enhancement and quietude for the practitioner as well as for the person who is receiving, so to speak.
Sure, sure. Now listen, since you are in the unique position of receiving information, data from other sources that most people do not receive it from, could you just say a few words about what you have received and what that information indicates or forebodes for us as humans on the planet at this point in time? Have there been particular indications of the kinds of things we need to go through or things that we can do as human beings with each other, with ourselves, that will support the growth and evolution of the planet with ourselves?
Yes. What I have gotten personally, not only with the guides that work with me and come through me, but others that I've also through other friends and channels and mediums, is it appears the most difficult thing we as humans have is understanding emotion, feelings, sensations in beyond what we are taught to focus them in. And the process of evolution is simply a process of being able to expand one's ability to feel and experience. And the more one is comfortable with the unknown of the feeling sensation, the unknown of experience, the more willing you are to change, to evolve, to transmute. And they seem to come through to give us as many kinds of myths and metaphors and ideologies to allow us that comfort, so that we are that ever interchangeable, ever transmuting aspect of God.
Wonderful. So if I'm going to translate, okay, from one idiom to another.
Okay.
If, as I understand you, we allow the feelings that we experience to come up inside ourselves and allow them to be what they are, without interpretation, before rushing in and saying what it should mean and what action this ought to dictate in the future for us or for others. If we just be with the feelings that are rising in our breast and be with it and experience it as an experience, in a sense you're becoming more objective toward what it is you're experiencing, and simultaneously subjective in that you're allowing yourself to experience without interpretation your life. And with that in mind, I think I'm hearing one of the ways you're speaking of right now.
Correct.
Is that true?
That is quite true.
In other words, what we do, Moses, and correct me if this doesn't line up with your understanding, is we rush in with interpretation. We rush in with judgment, we rush in with opinions, and we begin to opine about the whole bloody mess that's going on inside of our emotional life. And we don't really know one thing or another about our emotional life, or where it comes from, why it is as it is, etc. Sure, we have some ideas, and we have some idea of balance, and we have some idea of equanimity. However, when the water is stirred, we tend to just go amok. And then we interpret that life is going badly, that we don't have a good life, that we're not worth anything, and before you know it, we have a huge mess on our hands, just in our own lap. And it's all self-created through our interpretation, which we do not want to let go of.
Precisely.
And in a sense, what it is doing, when you spoke about blocking life earlier, it's blocking life, it's blocking perception, it's really blocking possibility.
It's true.
Are we on the same wavelength?
We're exactly on the same wavelength. Mitchell, I wanted to add something else here, and that is, from what I've learned of the channeling process, again, being the facilitator, is what they speak about is simply verbiage or words, but what is really created when one sits with a channel or medium is the feelings that are emanated from another dimension, another realm. And it's another aspect of experiencing love beyond the vibrational sense that we are accustomed to. And the more you get that sense, the more you acclimate to it, and it doesn't seem to be something that then needs to be figured out. It's something that you embrace, get comfortable with, and allow to take that sense. That is really what I have found that the channeling is all about, is the acclimation of love of a different vibrational essence.
Oh God, isn't that interesting?
The words just keep us occupied with our minds and everything, but the body is feeling this tremendous flow of love and acceptance and encouragement, and, just go to it.
And you find that people, once in the environment of feeling those resonances, are ready and willing and even interested to experience them?
I find that...
Or do you find people defending and resisting them?
I find that most that come surrender, because the love is just so enticing that you want to connect with it. And the only way you can connect with it is sort of dropping your guards or your interpretations and allowing yourselves to feel. Most people get tearful, which is not a sadness, it's just a joy, it's a sadness moving out for more of the joy to take place. And those who have a difficult time, let's just say rather quickly.
They don't stick around for all the goodies.
Nope. It's like, well, thank you, this has been nice.
Sure.
See you around.
Right. It's too bad, because they're really missing out. Because that's this is where the finer communication comes in.
It's true, Mitchell.
And it is, in a sense, Moses, if I understand the way of things to some extent, this is the direction in which we're all really going, and this is really our deepest, ultimate striving. When we say we want truth, when we say we want enlightenment, when we say we want what is deepest and most abiding in all of life, it's that we can actually fill our entire beings with those deeper resonances or higher resonances of love.
That is exactly it. I think that we have come to know truth as more of an action than as a feeling. Because truth and a feeling we get far more and misinterpret through the actions of what it is, or doubt or sway it.
Beautiful point.
And, well, you've said the same yourself in that, and I'm just reiterating in yet another vocabulary, just that. And again, if everyone felt, you would know, as we were talking about, we're all connected, is when you would know what others are going through. You would be that much more compassionate. You would know what your planet is going through. You would know what your daughter is going through when she's 500 miles away, or your childhood friend.
Sure.
Just examples. These are the open perception that we all have, that basically takes care of the individual in its sense of creativity, and in so being takes care of the whole. And yourself, myself, we are in this to provide, I would say, that service.
You see, Moses, Moses comes from a tradition of shamanism, which may be something some of you are familiar with and others may not be. But what it is a tradition of healers that goes back to time immemorial, really. And it was the healing, the holy man, the medicine man, the healer of the indigenous peoples throughout the planet for hundreds and thousands of years, going back Siberia, South America, Africa, all over the world. What we have found archetypally and historically are these particular figures who were the center of village life when it came to healing and spiritual divine guidance. Moses is very much in that tradition. I believe really psychotherapists are really part of that tradition as well. And even so are a number of other people in the healing arts. Now, what we see in Moses is really very much a living example. He is not overly encumbered by the forces of science, and yet appreciates and enjoys some of the scientific research that has become available to us. And at the same time, he is very connected to the real depths, the real roots of the shamanic tradition. And that involves the use of crystals, like you saw on the show earlier. It involves the use of creating environments for people's own being, whether it's happiness or sadness, and usually it's sadness, to well up and become present for release, and to create space so they can go on into the next step of their lives. And it's really very much a pleasure to have someone like yourself here, and being willing to share these sorts of depths and these truths with us, because it's rare. Truly in life it's rare to have someone who is, in a sense, so in touch with your roots, with the tradition that you are a modern manifestation of, that it's kind of gracing our modern society that has gone so far away from this in-touchedness, this attunement. And what brought me into that is just remembering, Moses, how in life prior to the so-called industrialized age, everyone knew that the earth spoke. Everyone knew that you could listen to and talk to plants. This is just a common thing. When nature speaks, she gives us things like spring, okay? And the flowers are dancing and jumping up and down, and the sun is out, and this is language. This is music manifesting. And people have lost their poetic sense. They've lost the imaginative. And every single anthropologist who's looked at any culture across the world has always found that play and playfulness, especially among children, and if it can be kept on into adulthood, creates the happiest, most well-adjusted, most loving people that the planet has really seen.
It's true.
So what we're speaking about, in a sense, is a poetic consciousness, if that's my way of putting it, which is a shamanic consciousness. It's, if we want to be in the field of psychology, if we want to be in the field of body work, it doesn't matter. It's what is it that we're bringing forth? How are the two hemispheres of our brains, if you want to put it that way, and use that language, anatomical and physiological language, how are they communicating, these two hemispheres, to allow us to have a full and rich life? So I ask you, how do we create that for ourselves from your vantage point?
Well, taking what we believe to be responsibility and having it equal joy, rather than having responsibility equal judgment, rather than having responsibility equal image, rather than having responsibility equal a lot of what we should do, rather than the joy that we really find to be the most fulfilling. For this industrial age has brought on responsibility, not so much to joy, but to a lot of constructs. Heaviness.
Responsibility is no longer responsivity.
Right. And again, joy is the simplest aspect that we have. Costs nothing, takes nothing. It is.
What does it cost to smile? right?
You get the exchange of another smile,
That's right.
especially if you smile sometimes as big as I do.
What a beautiful smile you have. Indeed. Very true. So it's almost as though we have become somewhat habituated to negative feelings, to suffering, to not seeing the world as the bright place that certainly it can.
Well, you know, when you have to work, and I'll use your words, which were so nicely said, industrialization, that means to a certain extent to induce something onto something else rather than working with something that is and allowing it to be in context. And we have induced ourselves into roles and ideas and images that have not allowed us to be the selves that we are, as we've induced certain things into chemicals and components. We've done the same all the way around. We've industrialized humanity. And I think that rawness, Mitchell, is what is next. Like it or not, we're all a part of that, because that is the easiest way for consciousness to expand, in its rawness. And we've done enough struggling to no longer take that with us. And the simplicity of what you speak about is what has eluded so many of us. Nature is quite simple. There's no worry, there's no pondering anything. Today is today, tomorrow is tomorrow. It's very simple.
It just is.
Just is.
It just is. This is what the great teachings have always shown us.
Just is. Which is a play on word, which is justice. True justice.
True
and it
justice.
just is.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That really makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? As you were speaking, it occurred to me that there is a polarity. Industry, ecology. To be industrious is to add on, to create, to make, to do, and ecology is to work with, to be with, to join, to accord with what is. As you were saying before, there's a difference between adding to, which has its place,
Right.
and ecologizing. I'm creating this distinction now. Ecologize, which is in a sense to work with the land, to cultivate it, to allow, to work with the elements that already are here in a simple, creative fashion, as opposed to saying, no, we're going to create manufacturing, and we're going to make people work from 9 to 9 every day. Well, do you know what happened, in fact, when they began to institute this, or institutionalize people into manufacturing plants? What a funny word. Manufacturing plants? Are we emulating nature in some kind of abstract and perverse way? You know what happened? All of the workers rebelled. It was so against people's ordinary ways of being to be put into an institution called a manufacturer,
Right.
plant or factory, to be there day after day, week after week, month after month, doing the same repetitive job, that they started going a pubbing. And this is one of the places where pubbing and drinking in England became so well known. Because
Interesting.
they would flee. They would actually leave the premises and just take off to the nearest pub and drink away their woes. They couldn't stand it. It was so unnatural. And we don't hear those stories today. Everybody's become such good worker bees that they just go, what do you mean you took a day off? You're kidding. Really? And so it goes. So it's been set up as a convention now. And we still rebel, and we still have all sorts of feelings about being in this kind of social structure, corporate structure, that so many people find themselves in. But I'm telling you that when it all began, just a century or two ago, there was tremendous rebellion among the ordinary blue-collar workers. They did not want to accord with what was being imposed on them. It wasn't coming from the ground. It was coming from above and down.
with what you're saying, I find it interesting because we seem to be now getting an influx of what was called the time of the 60s. And what I remember of the time of the 60s is it was a time not simply of freedom, it was a time of individuation. And I'm often shared through Mary, the one gift that makes human beings so unique is that each of us is individual. And the dichotomy that we've created is you have 5 billion or however many individuals who got to conform to certain images and constructs which for the most part do not allow them to be the individuals that they are born to be. And we seem to be getting back to that, which the 60s was a time of individuality and expression. Not that we can ever go back there, but we're using those same metaphors of freedom and change.
Transformation.
Once again. And I'll tell you, Mitchell, it's exciting and it's also scary because I too am learning how to be that free. And being with you here today has allowed me to share that with many, and also for you to allow me to be free.
Oh my God.
In experience.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't do it, but I'm glad that you felt this way and feel this way here.
So I hope all the rest who are sharing in on this will take something of that same sensibility.
Yeah, indeed. And on that note, we are going to be asking you back yet again to share with us on another show of A Better World. We want to thank you again, Moses, for being with us. Really appreciate it. The time just flies when you're around. So maybe that has to do with time play that we were talking about before. So for anyone who would like to get in contact with Moses and learn more about the kind of work he does and want to involve themselves somehow or another with it, or just get further information, they can reach him at 212-245-1691. Feel free to call, okay? Thanks so much for joining us. This is Mitchell Rabin of A Better World, and we will be seeing you again next week.